Hello again and welcome to our 6-part video series on playing keys in worship. If you haven't checked out the previous videos, I'd love to encourage you to do that. In the last video, we talked about register, where on the keyboard you should be playing in order to complement what the rest of the band are doing. But it'd be super boring and not very musically interesting for you to just play in the same ways, with the same chords, in the same register for every song. You'd get bored playing it and people would get bored of hearing it. So in this video, we're going to talk about some chord inversions. Let's start with doing some basic music theory. In each scale, there are 8 notes, or at least the scales that we're talking about in this video. For example, let's take C. The C major scale is this. If you convert these note names to numbers, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. Major chords, which are most common in our genre, are made up of the notes 1, 3, and 5. For example, C, then miss a note, we get to E, miss a note in the scale, and we get to G. So 1, miss 2, 3, miss 4, and 5. 1, 3, 5. A chord inversion is when you start the chord on a different number. For example, you could play C major like this. This chord starts on an E, but it's still a C major chord because it has C, E, and G, just in a different order. The different order means that this is an inversion. This is what we call the first inversion because we've moved it up by 1 note. We're starting on the second note of the chord rather than the first. A second inversion of C major would look like this. You see how we've still got C, E, and G, but this time we're starting on G, or the third note in the chord. Now because we're in C, and so you may hear C major being talked about as the 1 chord. This is what's called the Nashville Numbers system, which would be helpful for you to learn about. There's a link in the video description to a resource where you can learn more about it, but basically in C, your 1 chord is C, because C is the first note in the C major scale. Your 5 chord is G, because it's the 5th note in the C major scale. Your 6 chord is A, because that's the 6th note, and your 4 chord is F, that's the 4th note, and so on and so on. The benefit of this system over just saying the note names is that you can transpose into any key, and the pattern of chords, i.e. 1, 4, 6, 5, stays the same. You're just playing different notes. This is helpful because it means that you don't have to change the chord sheet every time you transpose. You can just interpret the numbers to mean different notes and chords depending on what key you're playing in. Why am I telling you this? Well, because inversions are often referred to in numbers. For example, in the key of C, C major, C, E, G, could be referred to as 1A. Remember that first inversion that we talked about previously? E, G, and C. That's the first inversion called 1B. And the second inversion, G, C, and E, is often referred to as 1C. That could be helpful to you as you hear those terms being talked about. Okay, so we've seen how you can change chord inversions in your right hand, but how do you involve your left hand? Well, often in worship music, you'll see a chord like G/B, aka G major over B. That means you play a G major chord in your right hand and a B note in your left hand. This is a form of inversion, as you're starting the G chord on a B note, or the lowest note, which is normally the second note in a G major chord, something like this. Now, why is this helpful? It's helpful because of how chords relate to other chords. Let's go to the key of G. Let's just play a G major chord for a bar, and then a C major chord for a bar. It sounds something like this. Now let's play a G major chord and then a C major second inversion, or in numbers a 1 chord and then a 4C chord. Do you see how that was much more consistent in sound and how it flowed better? Let's just play both of those again. So here's G and then C. And here's G, or 1, and C major second inversion, or 4C. This is why chord inversions are helpful. You can take this further by adding in your left hand, and the possibilities become endless. How about a G and then C second inversion, but with a G in the bass, something like this. Or you could do a C major with a G in the bass, something like this. Or how about a G major with a B in the bass? All these different inversions feel different, they give a different musical feel, and you can go on and on and on. It's all about flow and feel. You'll often hear this chord pattern. And that is making use of an inversion. It's going G, D over F sharp, or D first inversion, and then E minor, and C. So inversions can be used as passing notes too. Hopefully I'm still making sense to you. If not, then why not go back and watch that section again. Now I also want to briefly talk about suspended chords, or sus chords, as these can be a game changer when you approach the keyboard. In a previous video, I said that your role as a keyboard player is often to form a base or a background for other instruments to play from. Well, this is a tool that helps you stay musical, but helps you keep consistent, flowing, and undistracting. Let me play you a common chord pattern found in worship music. That sounds quite jumpy, doesn't it? I like, as a practice exercise, to challenge myself to see how few fingers I can move, but still follow the chord structure. This time, I'm just going to move just 2 fingers and keep 2 fingers still. Here we go. Do you see how that flows much better, is much less jumpy, and is much less distracting? What's happening here? Well, there's this little trick that I use, which means that basically half of your fingers stay still. Let's have a look at that. So here we are in G major. And we're going to try and keep our G and our D completely still in every chord that we play. So we could do this for C. We'll stay here in G, and then to C. You see how little my fingers had to move there. My left hand moved, and I moved 1 finger in my right hand. And we can do similarly for the other chords in the pattern. So G is here, and then C is like this, just like we talked about previously. Here's C, just by moving your finger up by 1 note. E minor returns back to the G shape in your right hand, so here again, here's E minor. And for D, just move your middle finger down by 1 note. What you're doing here, technically speaking, is moving the third note of the scale, around in the chord. For C, the third becomes a 4th. For D, the third becomes a 2nd. Now I know this might sound really confusing. All you need to remember is moving your middle finger up for C, down for D, and keeping it central for G and D minor. This creates really smooth transitions that sit well in the background. The cool thing is that this works in any key. Let's do the same in D. D is here. G is the 4th chord, so you want to move your middle finger to the 4th note in the scale, which is G. You just need to move your middle finger up by 1 semitone to G. A is the 5th chord, so you just want to move your middle finger to the 2nd note in the scale, which is E. So go back to your D shape, and just move your middle finger down by one tone, down by one note in the scale. So there's your A chord. You've got the D, then down to the E, so you've got the, and just an A in the bass, there's your A chord. B minor is the 6th chord, or the relative minor, so you can just return to that D shape in your right hand and use the B in your left hand, so there's that. And there you go, there's that whole pattern. Let's play it. D, G, A, and B minor. Now you can take this even further by changing inversions around, and again the possibilities are endless. In terms of what you should do with your left hand, I find that playing chords often clutters the sound, especially when thinking about the mix of the whole band. So most of the time I'll be playing octaves in my left hand. I'll occasionally alternate between a low octave to the 5th and then to a higher octave, something like this. But it's really rare that I'd advise playing full triad chords in your left hand for the reasons we've previously mentioned. So I'd encourage you to take some time to familiarise yourself with the patterns mentioned in this video to help you to transition between chords subtly. Try it at home in each of the 12 keys, become familiar with the shapes, and it will become second nature. Rewind this video and watch it until you've got it, or check in the video description for a link to a PDF of different chord progressions that you can practice with. These patterns are especially helpful when you want to be in the background, maybe with just a pad sound. Speaking of pads, we're going to be coming on to them and other sounds that you might like to use in our next video, so we'll see you there.